Saturday mornings once felt like sacred ground, bright colors on the screen, cereal in hand, and a sense that anything was possible. But hidden beneath the laughter and action were shows deemed too controversial, too strange, or too dangerous to last. What happens when childhood joy collides with adult panic? These are the Saturday morning cartoons that vanished almost overnight. The Adventures of Little Archie, 1968. At first glance, The Adventures of Little Archie seemed like wholesome fun. Archie and his pals shrunk down into kid-sized versions of themselves, navigating mischief and adventures in Riverdale. Fans of the comics expected innocent humor, slapstick gags, and the same charm that made the franchise beloved. But within months, critics and watchdog groups were sharpening their knives. The problem? The show leaned into surprisingly dark themes. Episodes contained unsettling imagery of bullies drawn as grotesque caricatures, villains who appeared almost demonic, and scenarios involving traps, kidnappings, and implied violence. Parents complained that it felt more like a horror comic disguised as children's fare. Archie Comics, already protective of its image, worried the cartoon could sour its reputation with families. After only a single season, the network quietly pulled the plug. The show was never rerun, never syndicated, and remains one of the strangest missteps in Archie's animated history. Looking back, Little Archie stands as a reminder that even the most innocent brands can stumble when television executives chase edgy appeal. What was meant to be playful ended up unsettling, and the laughter quickly turned to unease. Gilligan's Planet, 1982. Spin-offs often flirt with disaster, but Gilligan's Planet was a bold gamble. Imagine the bumbling castaways of Gilligan's Island, only this time stranded in outer space. At first, kids found the premise silly but harmless. After all, who wouldn't want to see Gilligan in zero gravity? But critics pounced. The recycled plots, combined with science fiction trappings, made the show feel both absurd and unoriginal. Worse, teachers and parent groups argued that it dumbed down science, spreading nonsensical ideas about space travel. The backlash wasn't just about poor storytelling, it became part of a broader conversation about junk food television rotting young minds. CBS, faced with dismal ratings and mounting criticism, axed the show after just 13 episodes. Unlike its live-action predecessor, there would be no cult following. Instead, Gilligan's Planet became a cautionary tale. Not every sitcom needs an animated Saturday morning reinvention. In the end, what was intended as light-hearted nostalgia turned into an embarrassment, proof that even a beloved property can drift too far into the void. Rubik, the Amazing Cube, 1983. The early 1980s toy craze turned nearly every product into a cartoon, from Pac-Man to My Little Pony. But Rubik, the Amazing Cube took things to another level, an animated series based on the Rubik's Cube puzzle toy. On paper, it was pure synergy. Kids already obsessed with the cube would now have a magical character to adore. Voiced with high-pitched energy, Rubik the Cube floated, solved problems, and used supernatural powers to help a group of kids. Yet the charm wore off quickly. Critics mocked it as a blatant commercial disguised as storytelling. Even young viewers grew tired of the thin plots, which felt like 30-minute toy commercials. Parents also complained about the shrill tone of Rubik's voice and the constant product placement. Ratings plummeted after the premiere, and by the end of the first season, the network yanked it off the air. Today, Rubik, the Amazing Cube, is remembered less as entertainment and more as evidence of how shameless 1980s television could be in selling toys. For many, the cartoon was a puzzle better left unsolved. Mr. T, 1983. When Mr. T premiered on NBC in 1983, it looked like a sure hit. The real-life star of the A-Team lent his voice and likeness to an animated version of himself, coaching a group of teenage gymnasts who solved mysteries between competitions. It combined action, morals, and the booming popularity of Mr. T himself. Kids were instantly hooked, but behind the novelty was a problem that became more glaring as episodes aired. The plots were thin, often recycling the same formula of bad guys cause trouble, gymnasts intervene, Mr. T saves the day. Critics complained that the series leaned too heavily on Mr. T's catchphrases and image without offering real depth. Even more concerning were the constant fight sequences, which parents feared glamorized violence under the guise of positive lessons. The show ran for 3 seasons, but by its final year, ratings had dropped sharply. Parents' groups lobbied against its aggressive tone, and NBC quietly pulled it from the schedule. Unlike the A-Team, the cartoon never earned cult status. It simply vanished from the Saturday morning lineup. Still, for those who remember, Mr. T embodies the strange era when larger-than-life celebrities were shoehorned into Saturday morning cartoons. It was flashy, loud, and memorable. But it was also unsustainable. The Gary Coleman Show, 1982. Gary Coleman was one of the brightest young stars of the early 80s, adored by millions for his role on Different Strokes. NBC decided to cash in on his popularity with The Gary Coleman Show, a cartoon where Coleman voiced an angel named Andy LeBeau, who came down from heaven to help children solve everyday problems. The concept sounded sweet, but the execution fell flat. Critics argued that the show tried too hard to moralize, reducing complex lessons into simplistic plots that felt more like lectures than entertainment. Children found it dull, and the humor rarely landed. Some religious groups even complained that the cartoon trivialized spiritual themes, portraying heaven as little more than a Saturday morning gimmick. Despite Coleman's star power, ratings were disappointing. NBC canceled it after just 13 episodes, and the series quickly faded into obscurity. Coleman himself would later admit that the cartoon never truly captured his personality or talent. Looking back, The Gary Coleman Show serves as a reminder that fame doesn't always translate into animated success. It was a show built on a star's popularity rather than storytelling strength. And when the novelty wore off, so did the audience. Hammerman, 1991. By the early 90s, networks were desperate to tap into the exploding popularity of hip-hop culture. Enter Hammerman, a cartoon starring MC Hammer as a superhero whose magical dancing shoes allowed him to fight crime. On paper, it seemed like a fun, modern twist: hip music, bright colors, and a hero with undeniable charisma. But the show was widely mocked from the start. Animation was clunky, the writing awkward, and the idea of magic shoes solving problems was met with laughter rather than awe. Critics accused it of exploiting hip-hop culture instead of celebrating it, offering corny stereotypes rather than authenticity. Even MC Hammer's real-life fame couldn't save the cartoon. Viewers tuned out, and the show was canceled within its first season. Unlike other celebrity-led cartoons, Hammerman failed to find even a nostalgic cult following. Today, it's often cited as one of the most embarrassing attempts at fusing music stardom with Saturday morning animation. Still, for those who watched, it's remembered as a time capsule of early 90s excess, proof that not every trend can be translated into Saturday morning magic. Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, 1985. In the mid-1980s, professional wrestling exploded into mainstream culture, and no figure was bigger than Hulk Hogan. NBC jumped on the craze with Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, an animated series featuring larger-than-life versions of WWF wrestlers battling cartoon villains between slapstick comedy. With Hogan at the center, the show debuted with high expectations and plenty of hype. For kids, the appeal was immediate: bright colors, exaggerated characters, and the chance to see their wrestling heroes in new adventures. But trouble lurked behind the ropes. The wrestlers themselves didn't voice their characters; professional voice actors did. Fans quickly noticed the disconnect, and it weakened the show's authenticity. Critics panned the simplistic writing, calling it nothing more than an extended commercial for wrestling merchandise. Parent groups also took issue with the constant fighting, worrying that Saturday morning television was normalizing aggression for younger audiences. While it lasted 2 seasons, by 1987, ratings had collapsed, and NBC pulled it from the schedule. Today, Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling lives in infamy as a prime example of mid-'80s television excess. It was loud, brash, and built entirely around a pop culture craze. For some fans, it's a nostalgic guilty pleasure. For most, it's proof that not every cultural phenomenon translates well into animation. New Kids on the Block, 1990. At the height of their fame, boy band New Kids on the Block dominated music charts, sold out arenas, and filled magazine covers. ABC wanted to cash in on the craze, so they launched New Kids on the Block, the animated series, in 1990. The concept was simple. The band traveled the world, performed concerts, and solved mysteries along the way. Fans were eager to see their idols animated, but the show stumbled almost immediately. Like Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, the band members didn't voice their characters. Actors did. The lack of authenticity disappointed fans who wanted to feel closer to the group. Worse still, the writing was uninspired. Episodes mixed cheesy action with concert sequences, but neither felt convincing. Critics savaged the cartoon as a marketing gimmick stretched thin, while parents worried about the blatant commercialization aimed at kids. Despite strong ratings at launch, interest fizzled within months. By the end of its second season, the cartoon was quietly pulled. The boy band's popularity continued for a time, but their animated alter egos became a forgotten relic. Today, the show serves as a reminder of how networks tried to squeeze every drop of profit from pop culture phenomena. It was colorful and noisy, but hollow at its core, a product of marketing more than storytelling. The Jackson 5-5, 1971. When the Jackson 5-5 debuted on ABC in 1971, it was marketed as a blend of music, fun, and animated fantasy. The band was exploding in popularity, and the cartoon offered kids a chance to follow Michael, Tito, Jermaine, Jackie, and Marlon on wild adventures between concerts. Episodes mixed slapstick comedy, surreal escapades, and, most importantly, the group's hit songs. At first, it was a runaway success. The music elevated the show beyond typical Saturday morning fare, and children loved hearing their favorite songs set to playful psychedelic visuals. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. The Jackson family had almost no involvement in the series. Voice actors portrayed the brothers, while producers controlled the creative direction entirely. Critics quickly pointed out the inaccuracies, noting that the cartoon often reduced the Jacksons to exaggerated caricatures. More troubling was how the show leaned into stereotypes, something civil rights advocates began calling out in the early 1970s. Some parents felt the program trivialized the group's cultural impact, turning real-life trailblazers into broad punchlines. After just 2 seasons, ABC decided not to renew the show. By then, the Jacksons had already outgrown it, moving on to bigger projects and a new phase of fame. Though reruns aired briefly, the cartoon was never celebrated in the same way as other music-based animations. Today, the Jackson 5 is remembered with mixed feelings, nostalgic for the era, but also a symbol of how corporations commodified young black artists without fully respecting their image. It was colorful, catchy, and historic, but also deeply flawed, and its early cancellation reflected those contradictions. Camp Candy, 1989. In the late 1980s, John Candy was one of the most beloved comedy actors in Hollywood. NBC saw an opportunity to bring his warm, goofy persona to Saturday mornings with Camp Candy, a cartoon where Candy played himself as the head counselor of a summer camp. The premise was wholesome, kids learning life lessons while enjoying wacky camp adventures. At first, parents praised the series. It had moral messages, environmental themes, and avoided the hyper-violence of many competing shows. Candy even voiced his animated self, giving it genuine charm. Children enjoyed the mix of comedy and camaraderie, and the series built a modest following. But as the seasons went on, ratings slipped. The slower pacing of Camp Candy struggled to compete against flashier, action-driven shows like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. By the early 1990s, networks wanted cartoons that doubled as toy commercials, and Camp Candy didn't fit the formula. Merchandising was minimal, and without financial incentive, NBC lost interest. Tragically, John Candy's sudden death in 1994 cast a shadow over the show's legacy. Though it had already been canceled by then, fans looked back with bittersweet affection. Today, Camp Candy is fondly remembered by those who watched it, not for its commercial success, but for capturing the gentle humor of a man who left the world far too soon. Its cancellation wasn't born of scandal or controversy, but of market forces that didn't value sincerity. Teen Angel, 1979. Few cartoons hold the infamous reputation of Teen Angel. Airing as part of the ABC Saturday Superstar movie and later expanded into Teen Angel and the new Super Friends Hour, the show followed a teenage rock band whose adventures mixed comedy, music, and light supernatural elements. It was an odd hybrid trying to ride the wave of Scooby-Doo while tapping into the era's youth culture. From the start, the show was a disaster. Critics dismissed it as derivative, noting the recycled animation and paper-thin plots. The band characters lacked charm, and the songs intended to anchor the series failed to resonate with audiences. Ratings were dismal. Behind the scenes, ABC executives grew nervous about how much money was being poured into a property that wasn't delivering. Meanwhile, watchdog groups accused the show of glorifying irresponsible teen behavior, pointing to episodes where the band's antics bordered on delinquency. Within one season, the axe fell. Unlike other canceled shows that later found nostalgic redemption, Teen Angel was buried almost instantly. Reruns were rare, merchandise non-existent, and the name itself became shorthand for Saturday morning flops. And yet, its failure tells us something important. Networks in the 1970s were scrambling to replicate formulas without considering originality. In their rush, they forgot the one ingredient children never forgive: a lack of genuine fun. Saturday morning cartoons promised joy, escape, and wonder, yet many vanished almost as quickly as they appeared. Some failed from poor writing, others from controversy, and some simply from time. But each left behind a strange echo of nostalgia. Which forgotten cartoon do you remember most? Like, subscribe, and share below.